I need meat to survive and thrive, and to tell the population that they do not need meat when a good majority of them do in fact need it based off their blood types and their diets, I would argue that that's criminal and that you are actually essentially saying that those people ought to be suppressed and bred out of the gene pool.
What's up, everybody? Natalie here with Allied Scholars for Animal Protection. I'm here with Max, and the prompt is that you can't say you love animals and eat them too. Change my mind. Max very kindly sat down to have a little discussion, so I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, totally unprepared, but I eat meat and I give my parents' cats plenty of scratches whenever I get home. So you can love them and eat them too. It's fine.
So because you pet cats, it's okay to pay for animals to be killed?
So by pay for animals to be killed, I trust you mean like purchase meat at a steakhouse or something like
Right, or anywhere, really.
that. Okay. I mean, yeah, sure.
When you say, like, you love cats and dogs, would you eat cats and dogs?
No, because the culture that I mean, it's just a cultural thing. I don't eat cats and dogs. Yeah.
Because the culture you were raised in says don't eat cats and dogs, but it's fine to eat pigs and chickens and cows. Do you think culture is a good measure of morality?
Culture? What do you mean by that?
Like, because something's cultural, does that make it moral?
Well, is human sacrifice moral?
I don't think so.
No, probably not.
So we can agree that just because something's cultural doesn't make it moral.
No.
So that brings us back to it's cultural to eat certain animals but not others. Is there any inherent moral difference between the animals we eat and the animals we don't eat?
Morally, I wouldn't say there's much of a difference. Nutritionally, and then like how easy it is they are to domesticate, yeah. How practical they are to, harvest and eat, yeah. There's a difference.
There's like a practical difference, but in terms of like their ability to feel emotions and pain and suffering, is there a difference?
No, I'd say pretty much all animals to some degree feel pain and emotion to, however it is they feel it. But I would imagine it's fairly the same across the board.
Yeah. So since, you love animals and you admit that they have the ability to feel pain and suffer, then what justification do you use for paying for them to be killed when you don't have to?
We have the intellectual and everything else advantage that puts us up at the top of the food chain. There we go. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. We're smarter, we're more dominant, and everything like that. Do you think the fact that we have the ability to dominate other species, does that make it moral?
Certainly a perverted way to go about dominating other species, which I would say is immoral. Like there's an abusive way to go about doing it, but if we're doing it in a clean and orderly fashion to where we respect the animal, then, and I have arguments against the industrial agriculture here in America, but I would say that there's definitely a moral way to go about harvesting the meat from all of these different products,
Sure. So let me summarize. So basically you have issues with kind of this industrial system that we have set up in the U.S., but you think there's like a right way to go about it. Would that be accurate?
You see, I myself can't say that there is a right way, but there's definitely different ways that work for places. And funny enough, I was talking to Ben about how Swiss cows are always so happy and how it is I've traveled and how you can actually taste the happiness in Swiss cows. So.
Okay. I'm not sure the specifics of like Swiss cows. Sure. I'm not sure about the tasting happiness. I feel like that's kind of hard to quantify, but let's bring it back to respect, right? Can you respectfully kill someone who doesn't want to die?
Respectfully kill someone. See, now you're talking about like a sentient being that like has responsibilities and obligations to society and everything like that, where, if they die, then there's like an actual economic impact.
No, I wasn't necessarily saying, I am talking about sentient beings, but I'm not saying sentient beings who have like a responsibility to society and whatnot. So why don't...
What we're going to kill doesn't have any sort of responsibility. It's just some guy that lives in his mom's basement. Is that it?
Well, when I say someone, I'm referring to animals as well. Like, would you call them someones or some things?
Oh, okay. So you mean someone as in the sense of like humans, animals, like fish, everything else?
Any sentient being, right? We can agree that animals are sentient.
Okay. So we're rolling humans and animals into the same category here?
Not necessarily, but we are saying that, like, what justification can you use to kill someone, which includes animals, who doesn't want to or need to die? I'm asking if that's respectful.
Someone including humans and animals?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, why don't we just keep it focused on animals, since that's kind of what we're debating? That's probably easier.
Humans, there's actual legal precedent for that.
That's it.
Yeah. And then, funny enough, animals, if you abuse them, there are certainly, laws against that too. So
Unless they're farm animals, and then the laws are written by the meat industry, so in their best interest.
like I said, there are certain things that I disagree with in industrial agriculture.
So why don't we just talk about, like, how much of the animal products that we interact with that are sold in the U.S., what percentage of them come from these industrial farms, do you think?
Honestly, I can't give you a real answer on that one. It's hard to say. I haven't done the research, but...
Totally. Well, luckily I have. It's over 99%. So if you are opposed to industrial animal agriculture, it would therefore make sense to oppose pretty much everything you see in grocery stores and whatnot. But I'm not necessarily trying to get you to oppose industrial animal agriculture. I'm trying to connect you with animals and show that they should have rights and have moral value, which you already kind of agreed that you love cats and want to give them scratches and that.
So what sort of, rights and privileges would you like to extend to animals?
Yeah. So basically the right to live their life free of human abuse and harm. We breed them into existence, give them these terrible lives, and then slaughter them when they're essentially babies. So I'm talking about negative rights, like the right not to be killed, not to be exploited. I'm not talking about, like, the right to vote or anything weird like that. So do you think that animals should have the right to not be harmed by humans when we don't have to do it?
When we don't have to do it, yes.
Okay.
But when we have to in order to feed ourselves, then sure.
I think that, if you're in a survival situation, you have to eat animals to survive. You can justify it. Are we currently in that situation where we have to?
See, right now we may just be surviving, but what about thriving?
Do you think you can survive and thrive on a plant-based diet?
No.
Okay. I'm curious where that belief comes from.
I tried going vegan and I became malnourished, lost a lot of weight, and it was actually quite unhealthy for myself.
Sure. So I think that's something that happens to a lot of people, because meat is calorie dense, right? So if you're just replacing it with plants and not getting the correct number of calories, you're going to run into nutritional problems. But all the dietetic associations from the US, Canada, Australia, UK, they all say that a well-planned vegan diet is nutritionally adequate for all stages of life. So just because you had this particular experience, that would be anecdotal, right? There are a lot of people who are very unhealthy on a meat-based diet. We wouldn't say that that's, evidence against it, right? So, how long were you vegan for?
Maybe about a year or so.
A year?
Yeah.
Was there any ethical motivation behind it, or was it just a plant-based diet?
Yeah, the industrial agriculture here in America.
Yeah. So where do you think you went wrong? Was it just you didn't know how to do it?
No, you just don't get enough nutrients out of just straight plant-based diet.
So what nutrients are missing from a plant-based diet that can only be found in animals?
Oh, you said it yourself. The meat itself is calorie dense.
There are plants that are calorie dense as well. You just have to make sure that you're getting enough calories.
Right. Which plants are those?
There's tofu, there's tempeh, there's seitan, super high protein. Potatoes are really nutritionally adequate. Sweet potatoes, beans are amazing for nutrition. So there are plenty of options. It's just, I think that sometimes people try it when they're young and don't necessarily know how to do it. And then it can present difficulties. And then you may think oh, it's not possible. But, I've met people who've been vegan for 40 years, 50 years. There are Olympic athletes who are vegan. Do you think if the diet is adequate for Olympic athletes, that it's adequate for you?
Well, not everybody is the same.
Sure, not everyone's the same, but there's no nutrient that's found in animal products that's not found in plants. So, there's no scientific basis for what you're saying.
What about certain minerals, certain chemical compounds that you can only derive from plants? Sorry, not plants, animals.
What are those?
You'll have to excuse me. Like I said, I came into this unprepared. But,
Sure. Even if you...
that exist. I can't cite what they are exactly right now. But
I'm telling you now that they don't exist. Everything that you can get in meat, you can get from plants as well.
Okay. Well,
So since you don't have to eat meat to survive and thrive, how do you justify it?
I need meat to survive and thrive, and to tell the population that they do not need meat when a good majority of them do in fact need it based off their blood types and their diets. I would argue that that's criminal and that you are actually essentially saying that those people ought to be suppressed and, essentially just bred out of the gene pool.
So you're saying that because I'm citing scientific evidence, the dietetic associations, like I mentioned before, that I'm saying that certain people shouldn't be allowed to be alive?
If you want to take it to its final conclusion, then yes.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it's scientifically proven that we can, all humans, regardless of your blood type, the blood type diet has been debunked many times, can survive and thrive on a plant-based diet. Since that's the case, why are we slaughtering so many animals when we don't need to?
Because people want it, because you can't dictate what it is people can and cannot eat.
Absolutely. And you're right that I can't, dictate things like that. But the thing is that I'm fighting for the animals. Every time you pay for an animal product, you are dictating that animal's life. You're dictating that they're bred into existence, that they go into a slaughterhouse. So if you're about personal freedom, which I get the sense you are, and so am I as well, then we should extend that freedom to animals, right? Because you already said that you love them and think that they're valuable. So why not give them those rights? Keeping in mind that humans don't need to eat animal products. And I can't force anyone to be vegan, right? I'm just educating people. Like you're going to leave today and you can choose whatever you want to do. But every time you choose, well, yeah, you can try plant-based burgers too. But every time you choose,
It doesn't taste the same.
sure. Are you trying to hurt my feelings right now?
No, I'm really not. It's just like I enjoy meat and plants. It just doesn't give me what it is I need.
It does give you what you need. Sure. So let's talk about the difference between needs and wants. I'm interested in the want part. So you're talking about like the taste pleasure you get from animal products, right? Yeah, I'm not going to say that they don't taste really good, right? Mm-hmm. But do you think that sensory pleasure that you get from eating animals, does that justify putting them through this industrial system of agriculture?
See, this is fun because you're essentially asking me if it's okay to take an animal, abuse it its entire life, and then traumatize it on its way to slaughter. And if that justifies me off of a whim wanting to taste meat, however well it's seasoned or cooked or whatever. Mm-hmm. When you come at it from an emotional perspective such as that, kind of confines what it is I'm able to say to a box, because if I say, yes, it does, then I look like an insensitive asshole. But then if I say, no, it totally justifies it, then, justifies the not killing or, and all that. If I say no, then, I would basically have to, if I were going to own up to that, eat vegan for the rest of my life. So I feel like there's something that's wrong with that box that you just made that I worked my way into here.
I don't know. I was just kind of trying to test your consistency there. So let me ask the question again. Do you think that the taste that you get, that was the argument you were using, does that justify what we do to animals?
Well, I might have said taste, but it's the overall fulfillment from an animal-based diet.
So you're changing the discussion from taste to something else?
Yeah, sure.
Can we agree that taste does not justify it?
Oh, respectfully, I would say that taste kind of does justify it, but the nutritional benefits justify it even further, yes.
Okay, because earlier it kind of seemed like you didn't think that taste really justified it, so I'm just kind of trying to drill down on there.
No, it does, because it's kind of like, it's like if you eat tofu when you're meant to eat meat. It's just, it doesn't fill you up the same, doesn't satisfy you the same.
It's like a human only living on tofu. Keeps you strong, but you're never fully satisfied.
All of the protein-rich plants, like, foods that you've said, I've eaten those, and it's not the same as meat. It does not give me the same that I need, that I get from meat.
Sure, so you're kind of talking about like a subjective experience. Like if we were to break down the nutrition, like the macros and the micros, it would be nutritionally adequate. So you're kind of like talking about this like kind of vague feeling, right?
See, I wouldn't say it's vague. And then going off on this, sounds almost as if you're trying to say that this is kind of like an outlying case that, my experience stands alone, but I would say that there are millions of, if not billions of people on this planet right now that would say that meat is a necessity in their diet.
I'm sure there are people who would say that, but they're going against all scientific evidence. We have papers over and over that show that not only is meat unnecessary, but it's, a huge cause of heart disease, which is our top killer. So we really don't need animal products. And that's not just like me saying it, like some random person. That's health organizations, things like that. So I'm not saying that your experience is invalid, but I am saying that maybe you should give it a try again and learn a bit more about different protein sources and test it out, because I don't know how long ago you went vegan, but that's very different from most people I meet who went vegan feel better. They feel just as satisfied. And even if maybe you felt slightly worse, like I don't think that justifies abusing animals, right?
It doesn't justify the abuse. Certainly not. I mean, I'm not calling for any sort of abuse at all for any sort of animal or anything like that. When I say I want meat on my plate because I need meat in my diet, I'm not calling for abuse.
I just want to cut in and make the point again that you don't need it. And do you think you can kill an animal without abusing them? Like if it's unnecessary, then how can you justify killing them? Because killing is a form of abuse.
Killing is a form of abuse, but we are at the top of the food chain, and I need what it is I need in my diet, such as so many other people do. And so, if there's a way to kill animals without abusing them, as we do on an industrial scale here in industrial agriculture here in America, then, yeah, I would do it. I mean, heck, if I had a farm, a bunch of cattle on it, I would take them and I would humanely execute them and then harvest their meat and then cook it up and eat it myself.
Let's back up. So if you found out that you're wrong about nutrition, that there was a way to survive and thrive on a vegan diet, would that change your mind about it?
Let's see, who would be the person telling me that I'm wrong? And then what are their motivations for telling me that I shouldn't eat meat?
Okay, let's say, a bunch of scientific papers who don't have some sort of vegan agenda. They've just kind of done studies on it. Would you trust them?
If they have absolutely no hidden agenda, and if they're looking purely at the science, they're looking purely at what it is people need in their diet, then, obviously, I would give some credence to that. But what it is we find, that would be people operating in a vacuum. Today, everybody has agendas, has influences, have people that finance them and everything else. And, if you kind of look at the trend, it's almost as if everyone is being pushed onto a vegan diet or some sort of artificial meat-based diet or something like that.
If you look at the advertising around us right now, I guarantee there's way more animal products being advertised than any sort of vegan stuff. But let's take it back. Oh, yeah. Like walk down the street, right? There's burgers, chicken. Yeah, absolutely. But
plant-based meat things coming out in Chipotle, coming out in Freebirds, coming out in all of these places that serve meat right next to them.
But I want to take this back to, let's say that whatever criteria you used for finding that out, let's say you did find out that you could survive and thrive as a vegan, then would you go vegan?
I would say based off my own personal experience, I would adopt a lot of those diet, a lot of the sort of things that they outline that a good diet is made out of. But of course, looking at myself, and then if I really wanted to build myself a fantastic diet, I would consult all sorts of doctors and physicians, have them analyze my biology, my blood, all of that, and then see what it is I need to eat and what quantities. I would have extreme meal planning done, and I would say that I would probably have a great deal of meat, probably in the form of red meat, chicken.
That's not what I asked, though. I asked if you found out, let's say you did all that and you found out that you didn't have to include any animal products, then would you go vegan?
If I did all of that, and if I found out that I didn't need any sort of animal products, no meat, no cheese, no eggs, no nothing like that, then yeah, sure, I would go vegan. I highly doubt that that would be the case. Then again, I haven't done this, so I can't say for sure.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. And then the last thing I kind of want to touch on is veganism. A lot of people think about it as a diet. It's really more of an ethical stance against animal abuse, so that includes not wearing fur, not wearing leather, things like that. Do you feel you already said you're against animal abuse. So in a sense, you already kind of sound like you're in line with the vegan morality. Would you agree with that?
What is the vegan morality?
Yeah, just that we should exclude harming animals as far as practicable and possible.
The intentional harming of animals needlessly, I would be against that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the thing I think that's holding you back is this belief that you need to be eating animals, right? So I would love for you to do research on that and hopefully come to the conclusion that you don't actually need it, because in reality, I can point you to some of these sources. I'll link it in the video. And you already said that if you found that out, you would go vegan. So yeah, I think the next step would be kind of like you doing your own research, because I don't want anyone to just believe what I say, right? Like, I am here to have people question things. Do you have any other questions or concerns or any other arguments against veganism besides the kind of health thing we keep coming back to?
I feel like in terms of health, what it is best for people. The jury's still out on that. In terms of the needless abuse of animals, obviously that's wrong. But of course, there's always going to be a need for animals, animal products, whether it be leather, whether it be meat, whether it be cheese or what have you. There's always going to be a need for that.
There's no need for it. Not in our modern society. Maybe, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, there was a need, but there's not anymore. And I'm happy to give you sources on that so you can look into it for yourself. So if you found out there was no need for animal products, then do you have any arguments against veganism?
Yeah, no, we still need animal products, because then what do you replace them with?
I mean, it depends what you're talking about, right? If you're talking about, cow leather, there's cactus leather, there's leather made from like pineapples. There's a lot of different options. If you're talking about fur, there's synthetic fur. If we're talking about meat, there's beans, there's rice, there's legumes, there's tofu, there's tempeh. There are over 40,000 edible plants. We don't have to restrict ourselves to these same 5 dead animals.
So you're talking about like all of these artificial type processes that would produce a leather substitute or some sort of like industrial.
Well, I think a lot of people don't necessarily know how leather is made. First of all, it's very artificial. They get the cowhide and then they send it to tanneries where they use a bunch of chemicals. And people who work in tanneries, their lifespan is like 50 years. Like, it really lowers their lifespan. So
Modern tanneries? Because there's leather from like, the 1800s that's still nice if you keep it oiled.
I'm not saying the leather is not bad. I'm saying the process to get the leather involves a lot of chemicals, because you were talking about like using chemicals or whatever. So I'm just showing that cow leather has that as well.
I think producing like vinyl, for instance, is less like environmentally harmful than just producing leather.
I'm not sure the specifics. I would say probably, yeah, because, you have to raise the cow. They have to eat a lot. They drink a ton of water. They use a lot of land. But I'm more interested in the ethical stuff. Like, why are we killing these cows and pulling some of them are skinned alive in slaughterhouses. Like, I've seen it. It's bad. Why are we doing that when we don't need to?
Again, I mean, practices like that I would have to disagree with. I'm sure the people who work in that industry, they would disagree with it too, but, they answer to the dollar.
Right. And you are, in charge of the dollar. You're one of the many people.
So I vote with my dollars.
Exactly. So why not vote to live in a less cruel world, since you can?
Yeah, if I could vote with my money, I don't think my vote would go very far.
That's another thing that people don't know about vegans. They think we're only trying to change individuals. We're changing corporations. We're going into Congress. We're lobbying against all this stuff. So it's a systemic change. But in order for things to really change at a big level, we also need individuals on board. So that's part of why we come out here and do that. So, okay, I've got one last question for you. If you could live a life where you intentionally harmed humans, intentionally harmed animals, or neither, what would you choose?
Well, see, I would like to not do any of that, but the world we live in today, both are very harmed by our modern society, of which we wrap ourselves up in this little isolation bubble and just imagine that none of that happens, and we pat ourselves on the back and feel good about everything.
Well, that's why I put in the word intentionally, right? Because we're all going to create some unintentional harm. But if we're talking about intentional harm, which would you choose?
Well, obviously, intentionally, I would like to not harm anything or anything.
Sure. So I just want to kind of bring this home. Like, every time you are buying meat or dairy or whatever, you are intentionally harming animals. And like I said with you, I really want to give you some more nutritional facts, because I think that's like kind of the biggest hiccup here. I don't think you can move closer to veganism while you have this set of beliefs that we need this stuff inside of you, if that makes sense.
No, those would be very contradicting. I wouldn't, say I'm on my route to veganism. I'd say I've tried it and I've passed it, actually.
But you also said you would do it if you found out that we didn't have to consume animals anymore.
Yes, if I found out that I personally didn't need it, after spending a lot of money in scientific research and having like the best people looking at it, then I would not. But as of right now, based off of what it is, resource-wise I have available to me, I need meat.
All right, and I'm happy to give you more resources on that. Thank you so much, Max. I truly appreciated this conversation.
If you enjoyed this and want to help me do activism full-time while getting exclusive content, join my Patreon today. Special thanks to my morally superior patrons, Amy and Andy.